Life show, hosted by Frederick Enteman on Global Voice Radio on Fridays at 10 a.m. Eastern. During his show, Mind Body Life founder and best-selling author Frederick Enteman investigates the little-known insights and daily methods used to create explosive life transformations and transitions with those that have risen from struggle and ascended to greatness. Here is your Mind Body Life host, Frederick Enteman.
Welcome to the Mind Body Life show. I'm your host, Frederick Enteman. I'm a former professional athlete, a best-selling author of Surviving Sports in the Game of Life, a coach, consultant. I help individuals from all walks of life, but most notably, I help professional athletes create lasting success and win the game of life. Welcome to episode 47. This is all about why connecting with nature elevates your entire life. And I was actually out in my favorite park in the state of Ohio yesterday and thought I would do a separate episode on it just because of the profound effects nature has on individuals' lives. And I know this firsthand after coaching hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals to better wellness. And the one commonality that tends to be the game changer is once individuals incorporate nature into their life, they all say, wow, why didn't I do this sooner? Especially with the empirical evidence, actually evidence and correlations now with new research on the impact that nature has on your mental health. And especially since all this new research reveals a clear link between well-being and this immersion in nature. It's really a special phenomenon. And what we're seeing from observations in psychotherapy, we know that mental health and well-being become elevated when people experience some kind of engagement or connection with the larger world outside of themselves. After all, this is the Mind, Body, and Life podcast, right? And so when you extend yourself or your perceptions beyond focusing primarily on your own self, your needs and worries and regrets or desires for the future, now a new empirical study finds evidence in support of which we can actually see clinically. And it found that virtually any form of immersion in the natural world, so outside of your internal world, heightens your overall well-being, and well as more positive engagement with the larger human community. And the research which I'm describing is from the University of British Columbia, and it really highlights, in my view, an essential dimension of true mental health, and that is the realm beyond healing and managing conflicts and dysfunctions, as important as they are. Mental health includes the capacity to move outside of yourself and thereby increase and broaden your mental and emotional perspectives about people and life in general. That's the realm that grows, but for example, from meditation, which I often talk about, or meditation is basically the mindful state of being grounded in awareness of the present moment. It's a kind of a buffer zone between being pulled by emotions and thoughts about the past or into anticipations about the future, or rather, you're simply present, conscious in the moment, observing the flow of your mental and emotional activity, but not being pulled into it. That conscious now allows for greater inner calm or clearer judgment, and it enables more focused, creative responses to everyday life. This new study examined the specific effect of immersion in nature upon the overall sense of well-being of participants, and it was published and the Journal of Positive Psychology. So for the experiment, researchers divided people into 3 different groups. For one group, immersion in nature was defined as taking time to engage in some form of connection with the natural world. That included not just walking in nature, but as I'm kind of describing here, it included anything not human built. So I guess examples would be a house plant, a dandelion growing in a crack of a sidewalk, or birds, or sun through a window. I think you get the point. But this wasn't about spending hours outdoors or going for long walks in the wilderness, is what the lead author, Holly Passmore, said. It's about the tree at a bus stop in the middle of a city and the positive effect that one tree can have on people. One of the other 2 groups focused on their self-observations regarding human-made objects, and the third did neither. And this author, Passmore, she pointed out that the difference in the participants' well-being, or their happiness and sense of elevation and their level of connectedness to other people, not just nature, it was significantly higher for the first group than that of participants in the group which noticed how only human-built objects made them feel. It was also higher than the control group, which did neither. I think we're seeing a growing convergence between empirical research like this and an emerging view of mental health. It is so a mixture of building positive emotions, broadened perspectives beyond ego concerns, and personal values that enhance and reflect awareness of our inherent interconnection with others. These are dimensions that have been ignored way too long by the mental health professions, as we focus primarily on healing mental illness per se, and not to bring in the whole big pharma thing, but when there's holistic means that make such an impact, and we know adverse side effects of prescription medications and prescription meds are now in the top 3 or 4 of actually deaths, or they're actually killing people. Nature could really kind of be that middle ground of the ultimate healing mechanism. A new study finds actually quantifiable evidence that walking in nature could lead to a lower risk of depression and stress and anxiety. Things I've spoken about in the past, but things that continue to intrigue me and things that continue to motivate me to bring out into the open, because there's so many people suffering in the rise of depression and actually suicides connected with anxiety and stress and depression, higher than ever before in American history. Specifically, the study I'm talking about is published in Proceedings of Natural Academy of Science. And it found that people who walked for 90 minutes in the natural area, as opposed to participants who walked in a high traffic urban setting, they showed decreased activity in a region of the brain associated with a key factor in depression. This is major, it's very significant. And these results suggest that accessible natural areas may be vital for mental health in our rapidly urbanizing world. And this comes from a co-author, Gretchen Daly, the Bing professor in environmental science and a senior fellow at the Stanford Woods Institute for Environment. And they quote, "Our findings can help inform the growing movement worldwide to make cities more livable and to make nature more accessible to all who live in them." And this is important because more than half of the world's population lives in urban settings. And that's really, that quote is a forecast to rise to approximately 70% within a few decades. But just as urbanization and disconnection from nature have grown dramatically, so have mental disorders such as depression. And in fact, city dwellers have a 20% higher risk of anxiety disorders and a 40% higher risk of mood disorders as compared to people in rural areas. People born and raised in cities are twice as likely to develop schizophrenia, by the way. So if you want to make these correlations, that leads me to asking these questions. Is exposure to nature linked to mental health? And then if so, what are nature's impacts on emotion and mood? And can exposure to nature help buffer against depression? So doing what I do and researching what's out there, there's a study about from Stanford that looks at natural versus urban settings. And in the study, 2 groups of participants walked for 90 minutes, one in a grassland area scattered with oak trees and shrubs, and the other along a traffic-heavy 4-lane roadway. And before and after, what the researchers did was they measured heart and respiration rates, they performed brain scans, and they also had participants fill out questionnaires. The researchers found little difference in physiological conditions, but really marked changes in the brain. So neural activity in the subguinal prefrontal cortex, this is a brain region active during rumination. So repetitive thought focused on negative emotions. This decreased among participants who walked in nature versus those who walked in an urban environment. And I quote, "This finding is exciting because it demonstrates the impact of nature experience on the aspect of emotional regulation, something that may help explain how nature makes us feel better." This is coming from the lead author. His name is Gregory Bratman. He's a graduate student in Stanford's interdisciplinary program in environment and resources. That is the Stanford Psychophysiology Lab and the Center for Conservation Biology. And these findings are important because they're consistent with, but not yet prove really completely, a causal link between increasing urbanization and increased rates of mental illness. That's more or less of what that proves for right now. It's really getting to what nature provides. So more or less nature services. And it's essential, I think, for urban planners and other policymakers to understand the relationship between exposure to nature and mental health. The more we're finding out, especially when you have legitimate studies like this. Daly also says, we want to explore what elements of nature, how much of it, what types of experiences offer the greatest benefits. And in a previous study, also led by Bratman and his team, time in nature was found to have a positive effect on mood and aspects of cognitive function, including working memory, as well as dampening effects on anxiety. And the studies are part of a growing body of research exploring the connection between nature and human well-being. And the Natural Capital Project, this is led by Daly, has been at the forefront of this entire work. And the project focuses on quantifying the value of natural resources to the public and predicting benefits from investments in nature. It's a joint venture of the Stanford Woods Institute for the Environment, the Nature Conservancy, the World Wildlife Fund, and the University of Minnesota's Institute on the Environment. This is such an interesting study that I was able to take pieces from, but the co-authors of nature experience reduces ruminations and subguinal prefrontal cortex activation. To give them credit, they include Paul Hamilton of the Laureate Institute for Brain Research and Kevin Hahn, a psychology research assistant at Stanford. I think this is extremely relevant because we know that being out in nature can have awesome effects on our body. You know, we breathe cleaner air, we get vitamin D from the sun, and we're encouraged to focus on our fitness as we can really enjoy the outdoors through whether it's hiking or biking or walking, climbing even in some areas. But what exactly can Mother Nature do for our mental health? I made a list. Here are ways that your mental health benefits from spending time in nature. And I already just mentioned, we know the obvious. You're going to have less stress because the research shows that nature has a significant effect on reducing stress levels. And interestingly, these results are actually apparent whether a person is spending time in nature or looking at nature or simply hearing the sounds of nature. Any interaction with nature can help to reduce stress. The University of Exeter Medical School in England studied the mental health data of over 10,000 city inhabitants. And their study found that people who live near green spaces had less mental distress. These results held regardless of income or education level and employment, actually. Also in Sweden, a separate study was carried out to test the effects of viewing nature scenes on reducing stress levels. And subjects were given a stressful math task to complete. I don't know about you, but math stresses me out. After the task, they sat through 15 minutes of nature scenes, 15 minutes of non-nature scenes, or 15 minutes in a blank room. Then participants who viewed the nature scenes actually had the lowest levels of stress. And then finally, in 2013, a study on the effects of nature sounds was carried out. And the researchers found that just hearing recorded sounds of nature had a similar effects on stress levels as looking at nature images or being out in nature. And I got to tell you, you can just go to YouTube and you can get all the nature sounds you want. Knock yourself out, lower your stress, take the action. We also know already that going out into nature is going to result in less mental health illness. Living near and interacting with nature also has the benefit of decreasing instances of mental health disease and other physical illnesses as well. And recently, Dutch researchers found a lower instance of depression, anxiety, and actually migraines amongst people who lived within half a mile of green space. And in other research, the term nature deprivation has been coined to refer to lack of time spent in the natural world, often in favor of time spent in front of screens, actually. And nature deprivation is associated with depression, loss of empathy, lack of altruism, feeling of isolation, and higher risks of death. Nature has been shown now to give individuals this actual recovery from mental health illness as well, which is amazing. And in addition to lessening instances of mental illness, nature is also used as a restorative measure for those who currently suffer from mental illnesses. And actually, researchers at Harvard University looked at the relationship between exposure to green spaces and mortality rates amongst 100,000 female nurses in the United States. And through this extensive research, they found that those living in the greenest areas had 12% lower mortality rates than those in the least green areas. And upon further research, they discovered that a main factor in the reduced mortality rate was improved mental health and lower rates of depression. I love nature because it's very calming. Not only can nature relieve stress, but it can go one step further and provide that sense of calm. At the Snake River Correctional Institute in Oregon, inmates are undergoing a real-life experiment on the effects of nature. In solitary confinement, prisoners exercise for 40 minutes several times a week in either a room with nature videos playing or in a room without videos. And a corrections officer explained these surprising effects, which he quotes, "I thought it was crazy at first. In the plain gym, there's a lot of yelling, like really loud, and it echoes horribly. But in the blue room, they tend not to yell. They say, 'Hold on, I got to watch my video.'" Quote. Amazing, huh? Nature's also proven to increase focus and attention. And another awesome effect of nature on mental health is nature's ability to increase people's overall attention. Who doesn't want that amongst our age of distraction, right? So studies are now showing that those are exposed to nature, even if it's viewing a tree from their window, or they perform better in school. So the natural setting calms them and sharpens their performance. And there's been a study by Kuo and Taylor found that experiencing nature, including backpacking, gardening, and looking at images of nature as well, and having trees outside one's building actually increased attention span and effectiveness. Attention improvement was greatest amongst participants who already suffered attention deficits. It's a pretty important point. And in addition, they found that walking through nature over walking in an urban setting reduced anger, reduced blood pressure, and increased positive effect. Being in nature increases relaxation. Researchers at Japan's Chiba University created a study to look at the powers of relaxation found in nature. And they had 84 participants take a stroll in the forest and 84 walk in a city center. Those that walked in the forest were noticeably more relaxed than their city center counterparts. They had a 16% decrease in the stress hormone cortisol, a 2% decrease in blood pressure, and a 4% decrease in heart rate. And researchers believe we're more relaxed in nature because that is where we evolved. Our senses are adapted to interpret scenes of plants and streams, not traffic and buildings. So therefore, if you're increasing relaxation, nature's going to provide you with better moods. If nature can increase our calm and relaxation, it stands to reason that it can also improve our mood. I think that's logical. And I also found a comprehensive study by Mahler, and that this was to be true. Simply by viewing images of nature, participants had elevated moods. And so in 2011, there was a study done to look at the effects of activity, like walking or running, in an outdoor versus indoor environment. And according to this study, the benefits for those participating in outdoor activities included greater feelings of revitalization and positive engagement, decreases in tension or confusion and anger and depression, and overall increased energy. And participants reported greater enjoyment, satisfaction with outdoor activity, and declared a greater intent to repeat the activity at a later date. It's been shown that being in nature increases resilience. But what that means, it's also been shown that nature can increase resilience in the midst of life crises. Resilience basically is a strong factor in many illnesses, both mental and physical. So people who are more resilient are more likely to believe they can recover and actually often do recover. There's studies from 2003 and 2008 that both found that nature acted as a remedy and a resource to people in crisis. And those people who spent time in nature had an improved state of health and were better able to face the crises. You're going to increase your self-esteem. There's another study that was conducted in which participants looked at images on a wall while running on a treadmill, and the images were pleasant rural photos, unpleasant rural photos, pleasant urban photos, unpleasant urban photos, and a control group of no photos at all. So both pleasant urban and rural photos featured nature and green spaces. And in the end, researchers found that the pleasant images, regardless of if they were urban or rural, had a positive impact on self-esteem beyond just that from exercise alone. And lastly, nature is going to increase connection and social interaction. Nature is really beneficial. We've learned that nature is really beneficial to mental health because it fosters connections and especially social interactions. A healthy social life is critical to mental wellness. And there's been studies that found that spending time in nature connects people to each other and to their world. Another study out of the University of Illinois showed that persons who lived in buildings with green space knew more people in their community and had stronger bonds with their neighbors. They were more interested in helping one another and had a stronger feeling of belonging than those who lived in buildings without green spaces. And in addition, finally, the tenants of green space buildings also benefited from reduced risk of crime, lower levels of violence and aggression in the home, and better capacity to cope with life demands, or like I already said, resilience. So to further prove his point, studies were done using MRI machines that measured brain activities. And when participants viewed scenes of nature, the parts of the brain associated with empathy and love lit up like a Christmas tree. And conversely, when they viewed urban scenes, the parts of the brain associated with their fear and anxiety lit up. Very interesting stuff. I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mind, Body, Life. I hope you got a lot out of that and that helps you. If you ever feel like you want to take your life, your mind, body, your life to another level, please reach out and message me. I'm on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and Twitter, and Facebook. Take care. Until next week. Hope you have a beautiful week.
Thank you for joining us. Listen every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern to Frederick Intiman host Mind, Body, Life. Connect with Frederick at www.globalvoiceradio.com. Tune in next week for another edition of Mind, Body, Life on Global Voice Radio.